Hello world, and we are back. My name's Fischl. This is going to be episode 190 of my poker vlog. I have two quick notable hands from my online endeavors this week. First, I call a raise from the button with 9-10 suited, flop 3 9s. I get to raise the flop and we get it all in on the turn versus ace jack. Have my opponent drawing to 2 outs, run it twice, he hits none of them, so we get a full double up. Pretty easy, straightforward value on that one. Another one that was very interesting was, and you will see it in two different screenshots, because under the gun opens, I 3-bet to $16 from the cutoff, button cold calls. Under the gun 4 bets, I 5-bet rip, I have ace king suited of hearts, button calls, and then the under the gun 4-better folds. The button in this hand happens to have 10-9 suited, and we end up winning on 2 runouts. But this does imply that we have a cold 3-bet call and a cold 5-bet call with 10-9 suited, so love the action, love the result. I bring this up because I have played on several clubs across the internet, and the one I'm in now is the most winnable I have ever seen in many years of playing. So if you have any interest in joining the club and battling with me on the online streets, you can message me on Instagram or Telegram. There will be links in the description below. And now we'll get in some hands from a 2-5 session at Sarasota, Florida, one-eye jacks. Let's roll the tape. First hand of note. We start out the 2-5 table today, and we are greeted with pocket jacks on the first hand. Under the gun raises to $20, the button and the small blind call. Being in the big blind with pocket jacks, I think this is firmly in our 3-bet squeezing range. We're out of position, so we'd like to take the pot down now. Not really interested in seeing it 4 ways. I make it $105. I think the optimal sizing would be like 120 to 140 since you're out of position, but in the moment I chose 105. And things are going to get interesting immediately as the under the gun player decides to just call, and then the small blind goes all in. The sizing of that bet being $220. After I get a dealer counted out, I think that this has to be a 5-bet spot.
This is either madness or brilliance.
It's remarkable how often those two traits coincide.
I mean, when the under the gun player just calls, he can never really have that strong of a hand. Looks like ace king or ace queen in my opinion, and then I'd love to just isolate against the small blind with a bunch of dead money in there. So I 5-bet to $425 before the under the gun player thinks for a little bit and then goes all in. He has me covered. I have about $800 in my stack, and I did not put over half my stack in the middle to fold to a back raise. So we're all in. Massive pot brewing. The player to my left under the gun asks if I want to run once or twice. He proposes twice. I'm happy to run it 2 times. And so for 2 runouts, the first board is Queen 9-8. I'm actually pretty happy with that flop. I think I'm getting in here a lot of the time anyway if the flop has a little less action on it. But the turn is a jack. We kind of bink that one. Seems pretty good. Second board coming. 6-4 deuce. All right, jacks is still an overpair. Turn 10 river deuce. I retain an overpair there. But now thinking that I lose to pocket 10s and pocket queens on both boards, but still beat ace king, ace queen on both boards. But the opponent to my left shows pocket kings, then the other player doesn't seem to want to show, so I'll show the jacks, and the two of us are going to chop up about $220 of money from the small blind, and seems to be decent for me. If I would have ran it once, I would have scooped, which would have been fun, but I'm always a 2 times kind of guy. What shoulda, coulda, woulda. Following that, we get a rare PLO double board bomb pot when 8 players put $10 in the middle. I look down at 10, 9, 8 deuce with 2 hearts. And on the top board, we look down at 8, 8, 7, bottom board 7, 6, 3. So thinking I have an amazing hand, trips on one with open-ended and a wrap on the second one. When a middle position player decides to lead for $50, I'm going to raise this one for value. Like, even if my opponent has a better 8, I should be able to win the second board a majority of the time. I also have full house outs. We're going to start building this pot right now. I make it $150. Folds all the way to an early position player who checked the flop. He decides to call the raise. That's kind of unorthodox. And the player put in 50 puts in the extra 100. So now the pot's getting pretty big. And the turn on the top board is the jack of diamonds. Bottom board 5 of spades. So we actually make a straight on both boards, with trips to fall back on top and on the bottom board. As long as the board doesn't pair, I will have the nuts on that one. So when both players check to me, I have about $800 in my stack, and I think I'm just getting it in here almost always, no matter what. So I start with a pot. We are playing pot limit. The bet size turns out to be $520. And now the first player goes deep into the tank. He thinks for a while, not sure what he has, maybe a single 8 that he's worried about. After a long tank, he eventually folds, and then the player who made it 50 eventually folds as well. I decided to just show, not really giving up a whole lot of information, letting the players know that when I pot it in PLO, I typically have a good hand on both boards. And that was a pretty strong one, builds our stack nicely. Before we're back to Hold'em, we arrive on this hand on the turn, had to start filming halfway through because with one limp, I'm on the button, I raised to $25 with 10-9 of spades. Didn't really think anything of this hand, but the limper is the only caller. He was in the hijack position. So when the flop is 8-7-6, I can't grab the camera right now because that'd look a little too obvious.
Oh, man.
But when check to me, I bet $15 on the flop, billing the pot when I have the nuts and my opponent calls. Turn is the ace of spades, and now things get weird as my opponent leads for $35. Well, as I say, these weak leads are often draws trying to name their own price, and if my opponent has any 2 diamonds, maybe even an ace-x of diamonds, not impossible, we're trying to build the pot right now. While we still have the nuts, decisions are easy, we make it $135. Easy 100 on top, but I guess I made it too big because my opponent pretty much snap folds.
Oh, you almost had it. You gotta be quicker than that.
Not too many almost pot-sized leads folds to a raise you see out there, but this guy found it, and he was correct because I had a very, very good hand. I win another small one before I look down at Jack 5 of hearts, and with a limp from our friend from the last hand, I'm in the cutoff. I'm going to try to isolate this player. I think it's someone that I have an edge on, so we're going to play a little bit wider against this person specifically. I make it $20 in the cutoff, the button decides to call, and then the player who limped calls as well. So 3 ways to a flop, not really happy the button tagged along, but we do flop top pair on Jack 10-9 rainbow, so a lot of connected boards coming out. When this check to me, I have top pair, I'm in position against the player I'd like to play against, so I bet $30. Thankfully the button gets out of the way pretty quickly, and my new friend decides to call. When the turn is the 3 of hearts, I was going to check back a lot of dicey turn cards, but this is going to be one that I'm going to continue betting on. Any single queen, single 8, random 10, random 9 are probably going to pay off a bet, so we're going to size up here, targeting the queen X holding specifically. I bet $80. My opponent counts out the chips immediately, thinks for a little bit, and then puts it in. I'm really hoping for a brick on this one, and we get the 9 of spades on the river. Generally good. Now for some reason I beat Jack 8 and Jack 7, but not too many other hands. When my opponent checks to me, I don't think I'm getting value from worse. I think all the draws that missed might go crazy if I go for a value bet. I'm not really hoping to get called by a 10 or a worse jack or a pocket pair, so this one's going to be a pretty clear showdown value check back. My opponent snap says I missed, and that's good for me. I get to show and take down a pretty decent sized pot with a very speculative hand. We win another small one before we look down at another somewhat speculative hand, Queen 8 of clubs from the +1 position. Under the gun makes it 15. This is a player that I think is pretty GTO, so I think Queen 8 suited specifically can function pretty good in position against this player, having a pretty balanced and wide range. Additionally, if the table had been 3-betting a little bit more frequently, this one has to just be a pure fold, but thinking I'm almost never getting 3-bet here and blown off my hand, I choose to just call, and we end up going heads up to a flop, which comes 9-8-6 with 2 spades, 1 heart. Now my opponent checks to me, and with middle pair, I think I'm going to go for a value bet here. I think my opponent has a lot of 2 Broadway cards, a lot of ace-x, maybe some spades, tons of hands that I'm beating that actually are going to pay off multiple bets. So I start off with a $20 bet, half pot size, and my opponent decides to make the call. When the turn is the 9 of clubs, it's actually a pretty good one. My opponent does have some top pair decent kickers that are checks on the flop, but not too many, and especially when the top card pairs, it makes it highly less likely. So when check to me, I can still value bet against, Jack 10, Queen Jack, any 2 Broadway holdings, ace highs, spade draws, tons of stuff actually. So I bet $45, and my opponent makes the call again. The river is quite disastrous. 7 of diamonds, not quite what I'm looking for.
It's not possible. Not probable.
Hoping my opponent doesn't have a creative lead here or just have Jack 10 for a hand that's going to value bet. But he decides to check to me. I pretty happily check it back, have some shutdown value. My opponent announces 1 pair. And thinking back on it now, that's usually what a player who has like pocket 3s, pocket deuces, and underpair of the board says. But this guy in specific might have just been saying that because he has ace high and there's 9s on the board, because some people do that too. And He seems like it could be the type. Either way, I just show my 8. When he says 1 pair, I'm nearly certain that I'm good with this hand. And indeed, I am. So marginal hands are actually paying pretty well for me today. Which brings us to a final hand of note. No more marginal. Time for some premiums. We looked at a pocket kings in the small blind. Too many players are folding for my liking, but the button does not disappoint. He makes it $15. I'm of course 3-betting the kings, trying to build a pot, play a big hand. Let's make a big day happen. But to my $50 3-bet, both players decide to fold, and not quite what we're looking for with kings, but it's definitely better than losing. On this day, I'm in the game for $800, out of the game for $15.18, which is a profit of $718 across 2.5 hours, equates to $287 an hour, or 57 big blinds an hour. Yeah, pretty happy to get bailed out with jacks into kings. I suppose somewhat unlucky because if I run it once, I just scoop. But we're happy to not just get stacked on that one. But really the story of the day was getting multiple streets of betting with marginal hands. And this comes from a little bit more active studying recently, and being able to get 2 value bets in with marginal hands and being correct is definitely going to help your win rate. And if you've made all the way to this point, my next video will be a very rare 5-10 session that I actually did pretty well in. So I recommend subscribing. Stay on the lookout for that one. That's going to be a fun one. I will see you on the next one.